Hello, everybody. We're picking up in Chapter 5 where we left off last time, roughly. I know that there might be a little bit of overlap here with where we finished off last week, but it has been a week that's gone by since I've touched this stuff. And what I really want to do is I want to make sure that I've populated the variable. You can see on the right side of my screen here how the very first command that I've highlighted um, basically takes all the articles that are in our database and pumps it into one single variable. So I want to start with that step just simply so that I have all that stuff in memory to work with. On the left-hand side of my screen, you see I'm at a regular C prompt, and I'm going to navigate to the root, and then I'm going to navigate into my projects folder, and then into my blog folder, and then I'm going to issue the command for Rails console so I can get the interactive Ruby prompt where I'm going to do most of my work for the remainder of the chapter here. So hopefully you guys are all with me on that. And if not, you might want to actually pause the video for a second until you get up to that point. But I do have my prompt, so I'm going to begin. So I'm going to type the command that I see on the right side of the screen there, which says articles equals article capital A dot all. And as you would anticipate from seeing, what's in the book, it goes through, it grabs all the articles in the article table and puts them into basically uh, a large array of arrays, really is what it is, right? Because for each record that's in the database table, that could constitute like one array. So really we're just building an array of arrays here and putting it all in memory. And yes, the prompt, when you do it at the prompt, it responds by spitting it all back to you on the screen. So yes, that is all the articles and all their little attributes for every column that you see up on the screen. Right, the next thing that they want us to do is work with this command. Okay, and this is kind of an interesting one. And what this one does, as you might guess, and I already see I misspelled, I'm typing in this command articles class, and when I press enter on this, it basically, what it's going to do is tell me the structure that we're working with. Now, I want you to see something that's really kind of interesting here, is how the version differences have changed the output of this command. Okay, so you're not doing anything wrong. In the original iterations of version 4 of Rails, it would say, well, what did I create by running that last command? You created an array. What this is showing you now is that really what you're doing is you're pulling in something from active record. So now I don't know if there's a fundamental change in the technology here, because clearly we can look above and see that there's this big complicated array structure. But really what they're saying to us is that it's treating it more as an object that's recognized by active record as such. And they're not just simply labeling it an array anymore. If we type that command again, articles, and then ask for size, as you might anticipate, it should list the number of articles that we have. The book says 5, I say 6, and ever since I've been doing the examples, I have one more than the book does, so nothing wrong there. But you see that it does give us the simple SQL command that's actually pulling it in from the database. Very, very simplistic little count command you guys already might be familiar with. Of course, since we are basically dealing with an array structure, we also, using array style syntax with square brackets, should be able to type in a command like this, where we would pull in hypothetically the first article from the array and its title. Now I kind of already know what's going to happen here because I know what my first ID number is in there. And really, if you want to look, right, my ID number is 1. Why isn't it 0?
Just do article 0.
What if I forget to do article 0?
No. If you forget the name, like if you have title, just type in article 0 and it'll show everything.
That's exactly correct. It'll show the whole darn thing. Now, I do have a little cheat sheet up here, but there is still that syntax thing where even though our ID number is 1, the array position is still 0 numerically, just like in any other language. And that should be pretty clear. So that means that the last article, of course, what would be if I have 6 articles, which article is that one? Number, yeah, it should be number 5. And then you can verify that by looking at the listing above. Yeah, right, and that's the other way to do it, Nathan. If you're not really sure about, the output that you're getting here, and you're finding that big block of green array text really hard to read, there's nothing wrong with pulling up that SQLite browser and just looking directly at the database. Same difference, really. And truly, for that matter, if you wanted, there's all sorts of little output things that you could do here. And if you got to the point where you're comfortable with the language, you could write some scripts that would nicely format it for you into a table or straight into a browser. It's not really that hard to do. All right. Next command we're going to try is articles dot first dot title to show you that we're working kind of with like a Linux style syntax here where we can chain together the methods that are part of the classes. We see that in JavaScript all the time too, in jQuery and many other modern languages. And then the next thing that we want to do is kind of a little bit more interesting and powerful one. And this is the article.each command. Now, where your mind should instantly go when you see each is a for each loop, right? So it's basically a for loop that isn't numerically controlled. It's controlled simply by the number of entries of whatever structure it's traversing to get the output. So that's basically a for each loop. And then inside a set of curly brackets here, then inside a set of pipes, we're going to say article singular. And we know what puts is. That's kind of like an echo command. We're going to echo the article title. So that means we're going to traverse the structure, and for each item in the articles variable, it should output that information. Now, if you notice, wow, I put a lot of stuff up on the screen, but really, it did do the key part. So notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 article titles. And then it gives us the secondary output where it outputs all the other stuff that's going on. And if you look at our book, the way the book handles that right here, they're really implying that there's a whole bunch of stuff on the screen. That's implied, you guys, by the ... dots. So they're just showing you the title or the beginning of each article, basically, and then ... Yeah, so that's not a command, nor is that the exact output. That's just to give you a little bit of a heads up. Where it gets a little watery now is when we come to these next commands, and we've run into this problem, as you can imagine, numerous times in this class as I've taught it over the years. So let's go ahead and run this first command here and get that one happening. So that one is articles equals. So now we're repopulating the variable. You're catching that? So our pre-existing variable is now going to have its contents wiped, and it's going to be populated with new information. And what we're going to put in here is article.order. So now all of a sudden we are sorting what we're pulling in from the database. That's the key. And then in parentheses, which field are we sorting by? And you can make an assumption here too, and this is kind of interesting. The assumption is when you're sorting something, what's the sort order that you assume when you're sorting something? Ascending or alphabetical? Right. But ascending, a database person thinks ascending, absolutely, because that's the terminology we use in SQL. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we're not telling it to reverse order it or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and press enter on that one. And you can see that it typed in, boy, that's really hard to read, but the command I typed is right here, right above the blue SQL line. And then, of course, it says what the SQL command was, and then it hypothetically grabs all that, we're assuming, and it's ordered by the published at date. So it might be in a slightly different order than what we had previously. might be, okay? So chances are probably not. If the published at date was done automatically, they probably went into the database sequentially. However, if you remember, there were a couple of them where we did manually force them in, so hypothetically those would be different. Now we're going to type the command that's highlighted in yellow now, and that is very similar to the one, if not identical to the one that we did before. In fact, it is with the one change. Okay, so same technique. We're going to traverse whatever structure is in articles, right? We know it's a series of arrays. And then for each article, we are going to echo to the screen or put on the screen the article and the published at date. So let's go ahead and press enter on that. And then I do want you to notice that all these timestamps that follow are not part of the command. And you know what? Just like you, when I first got this book, I blindly went in and started typing that stuff in, right? And hopefully you didn't get stuck there. Um, and now you can see from the output, so the actual output of the command is these time and date stamps. And you can see that all of them basically have the same time and date stamp because that's just kind of how we did it, right? Maybe yours aren't that way. Mine are. I have one that's got a different time and date stamp because all the rest of them I did on the 15th. And I did it without I did it without an actual time in it. So I can't really sort beyond that. Yeah, you have a question?
Let's have an article for 2016.
That could be what you typed in. Maybe mistakenly. All right. Next thing that we're going to do is basically take that same command that we did before. So I'm up arrowing here. And the only thing that's going to change now is that we're going to sort in reverse order. So notice that just a little change in the command. So I highlighted it in the text in blue. And so we're going to come in here at the prompt and just tweak that ever so slightly to match. I do want you to notice that for whatever reason, they switched to single quotes. Do you guys think that's really necessary?
Yes,
And why do you say that?
that works out not great.
So you're just erring on the side of caution, basically. Okay, that's not a bad thing. You know, and frankly, that's probably what I would do just to be safe. But the truth is, it doesn't actually matter. All right, so there we have now hypothetically reverse sorted them, and I should just be able to up arrow again and do that same for each loop. And this time you should see that the one date that I have that's different is now at the bottom instead of the top. That was really the whole example. But what it's showing you is that we can pull stuff out of memory, run a sort on it, and put it up on the screen. Because if I can grab it and store it in a variable, then all I have to do is call that variable to output to a web page instead of a prompt, and I have all that content in there. So when you think of things like if you're looking at a web page, and let's say you have a listing of articles, and you go and you see that each table that you have has a column heading, and you know how in spreadsheets and a lot of lists like that, you can click on the column header and it'll sort or reverse sort. I mean, the code for it is really just this simple. Right? And the truth is, it's such a common action, it's just built right into the language. But that's the logic that goes behind it and the kind of thinking that you might want to have as you're designing an application that has that kind of tabular data in it, that a lot of people make the assumption that you can click on the headers and do sorts because that's just a common thing that you do. So it's not a bad feature to provide to people.
This would work for small, big,
It would.
looks like it's up and off. What about large numbers? There, you could take
Yeah, Richard, you're nailing it right on the head. Yeah, because really when you're pulling in, right now we're pulling in like 5, 6 articles, all right, and you're pulling in full text, and right now we have like a sentence in there. But what if it was 100 sentences or 1,000 sentences, and what if it was 1,000 articles? Yeah, you probably wouldn't try to load it all into memory. In fact, what you would probably do instead is you would try to load strictly the titles or strictly the ID numbers, and you'd use that sort of an approach. You would also, I think, at that point, when you're really getting that memory intensive, you would probably consider a different database system, and then you might also consider working with stored procedures where a lot of these things are pre-created and you're just calling them, right? So then the work's not happening in the browser, the work's already happened in the database. But there is this fine balancing act that happens. And what it is when you're working on the web, the last thing you want to do is have a database that's so heavily queried all the time that your front end application is waiting for a response. So it's okay sometimes to load things into memory like this, have it active in the browser, and then you're just calling it up. There are advantages to that. That's really what we're doing here, because by putting stuff into a variable that exists in memory for a brief moment of time, just like a person visiting your website. If it's something that's going to happen all the time, you have thousands of users hitting it, there's really some mindset changes that need to make. But if you get into that sort of a problem, it's a good problem to have typically, because you're probably working with large sets of data and probably working with an application that's important and necessary. And so there's impetus behind it, basically. All right, let's do just a little bit of this finding with condition stuff. And we're going to just type in that first command that we see there. So the first one is article dot where. Now, what does that sound like, database people? Yeah, it does sound like SQL. Now you can see that I'm putting in title with a prefix of a colon, so that indicates it's a symbolic reference. And we are searching for this title. Now I'm concerned that I didn't name mine exactly that, so I'm going to go searching. Well, actually, I did name it exactly that. Okay, so I'm just double checking that I'm going to run a query for something that actually exists. So I'm putting it as a string directly in there. And yes, right now, the string is hard-coded. It's a literal string. The other option, of course, is that you could populate that spot with a variable. And if you were application writing, that would uh, tend to be the case. But notice that they're also adding another like verb at the end here, first. Well, this is kind of like a misnomer because we know there's only one. But just in case there were two, it would find the first of the two. So it's not really a necessary command, but just to show you that it can actually do that. Then to me, always the interesting part is look at the SQL output that's generated. So you see that there's that comparison, that tie-in to the technology that you already know. The other one that they ran was the all command. So it's how many of these how many articles all have that? Well, once again, it's just one. But just in case there happen to be two, just in case. All right, and here's kind of an interesting one. Do we have any articles whose title is unknown? Now the question is that a string that they're checking for? So is the article title actually unknown?
It's actually going to be unknown.
Yeah, it actually would be.
Like, it's like
Yeah. So look at and therein lies the actual answer to this question. Notice when you look at the SQL output, yeah, it does put in a question mark actually. So even though the misnomer is that maybe there's something in plain text called unknown, no, it really is actually putting in the wild card in the SQL query. And that's actually a nice thing to know. And it does come back with an empty result set because we don't have any articles without titles. So, all right, now we're going to shift. That completes the finding section. And now we're going to shift to the next one of the major CRUD operations, which is updating records. So first thing we're going to do is let's reset our variable. So we're going to type in article equals article.first, And at this point, we know that it's going to pull the first article in from our database and store it in memory. All right. Then they mechanically, even though it's already on the screen, I know I'm just typing the commands in anyhow. They want us to type in article title. They want us to type in published at, and these are already in the database, and we could just look at it that way. And then the other thing that they want us to do is type article save. Yeah. Now, it didn't really seem like it did anything because it was already what it was, right? Right. Okay. But remember, that's the process. Like if I did want to change some of the content here, I could certainly do that at this point. Okay. So as silly as that sounds, that is the technique for updating a record. Load the object into memory. Pick the attribute you want to change and adjust it. If I wanted, at this point, to let's say maybe change the title, maybe that's not a great one to change, but let's go ahead, change the title. And that's really the part of the example I didn't actually do. I don't know if you guys caught that or not, but I didn't actually type in Rails 5 is pretty neat. It's pretty, okay. We use the new school terminology, rad. I just want to let you know that that's about 40 years old or 50 years old too. So. All right. All right. And then if I issue that article save command, now you can see the difference in the SQL command that it actually saw something different and actually did it. If I want to be sure that that worked, and you can see that it's stuck. But that is a painfully easy way to update a record in a table. You just pull it up, whatever query method you're using. In this case, we pulled up the first one, but we could designate it by ID, by name, whatever. Just load it into memory, and then pick the attribute you want to change, force the change in, tell it to save. Now it's in the database and you're done. That's all it takes to update a record in this language. The other approach, once again, is they're having us do this. So I'm going to do it just because they're doing it. We're going to reload it back into memory. Okay, no harm done. We know it's already there, but we're reloading it back into memory. And then we also have this method that we can use. And this one I'm going to copy and paste it in just so that I don't mistype it. And so if you notice article.update underscore attributes. Now for me, because the line is long, you see how it truncates it here and I get the little bracket mark, but you can be rest assured it is there. And then the parameters that you're passing in are the title, right? So we're changing the title and we're changing published at. And notice 1 day ago. Yep, believe it or not, folks, that's actually command. And then, of course, if you want to check that, you can just article title. Somewhere here, there's a published at. Was that 1 day ago? Yes, Sunday was 1 day ago. So you can see that it worked. So 2 different methods to update the contents of a table entry. Load it into memory, manipulate it, save it, or run the command all at once, which in essence does the same thing. It's just a little bit more transparent. So it's a matter of efficiency. You can do it in 1 line of code, or you can do it in several lines of code. This one here, 1 day ago. Yeah, it can give you different results depending on how it's typed in. That is correct. But one day ago, um, I'm looking at the time. Is the time correct? Well, that's it. That's what time it is in England right now. So that actually is correct. And we don't have a universal time clock adjustment in there, so that's being pulled off of the system directly.
One time we'll learn formatting or something.
Yeah, we don't really delve into that very deeply, Robert. Yeah, but yeah, there's a whole manual for it. What I would recommend is you look it up on the Rails website, the documentation, because there's a lot of different ways that you can format the output.
That's one of the issues when I was looking at what I tried to find something in this documentation that the standard definition of support and I had trouble finding it.
A little bit of a clue. A lot of programming languages stand on top of the shoulders of the languages that came before them. And people don't realize this, right? So if I'm working in, let's say, C Sharp or Ruby on Rails, a lot of times what these languages do is they import the libraries from the older languages where all the work has already happened. So if there's a sort algorithm, why rewrite the sort algorithm? The thinking is the people that wrote the C language or the C++ language already did it. So it's a real common technique for many languages to just simply pull those libraries in. So like, for example, PHP, Ruby on Rails. To some degree, I guess Python does the same thing. They just pull in the C++ libraries and use those libraries. It happens transparently in the background. And when we pull in certain classes and methods, what they're really doing is they're going to those libraries, pulling in the code, converting it to what works in this language, and to you it's transparent.
I think I more or less remember what was written, but you can't put in the.
Now, we had one little interesting development here in class, and I'm recording it into the video. Nathan happened to have the SQLite browser open and said that some of these changes don't commit to the database if you have that other product open. So it's something to be aware of. And you know what? I have run into that issue in the past, and I really never gave having that tool open a second thought. But that's an excellent, excellent point. So we'll have to keep our eye on that. All right, let's move on to the D in the CRUD, which is the delete or the destroy command. And what we're going to do here is we're going to run these commands. So the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to load in the article. And notice this is a singular article, right? So we're not getting rid of the previous variable. This is just a singular. We're going to pull in the last article. So we're going to go article.last and load it into memory. And unfortunately, this is my favorite article, the Rails Pub Night. And we do see that that's the one it's pulling in, so the one with ID number 6. And then we're just going to issue the command article dot destroy. Okay. And you can see puts that SQL command in red to show you that something is happening. And then it indicates which one it deleted. Now, of course, if you want to make sure that that's the last one, how would we do that? All right, so if I type in article, but notice what I'm doing here, because what's loaded in memory is something different, right? So, and actually what I could do is this. I load into memory that same command, right? Now you see it's a different title already and a different ID. Yeah, and in this case, I just want to see what the title is of that one, and I see it's a different article, just to confirm that it was deleted. This is without going into the database. So we do know that it worked. So updating is pretty simple, you guys. Destroying is pretty simple. I mean, once you see how something is created, same basic approach. using the update and destroy are pretty easy to do. All right, let's move on with the example. And you know what? I'm not really too keen um, on sitting here and destroying stuff in my database, frankly. So I'm not going to run the last few commands. I think that you guys can take it on faith and you can type them in. But basically the approach here is that you are able to pull in, for example, and I don't know if I have a location attached to this particular article. I don't. Okay. The author's does, I don't. If I want to actually destroy the last article directly, I can issue that command. And I want you to notice that this one's a little bit more brute force. And you absolutely can do this without looking at it. Go ahead and destroy it. Whatever the last article is, delete it. That command that I highlighted will do that. So it's kind of like it bypasses the recycle bin, if you want to think of it like that. We're not like pulling it into memory first and then destroying it. We're just brute force destroying it without taking a look, and that's absolutely uh, what will happen. The other thing that you can do is you can also issue that same command and apply the ID number for the particular article directly. So if you happen to know that, once again, not going into temporary storage first, it's just brute force, singling it out with an ID number and getting rid of it. Just does it. If you want to get rid of a series of them, and see, I don't know if you guys are catching on, but the reason I'm not doing this is if I do this, all of a sudden I don't have anything in my application anymore, uh, which is why I'm avoiding doing it. So with this particular command, it gets rid of a range. So um, in this case, the first one would be article with the ID of 2, ending with article of 3, but those numbers could be something different, but you can absolutely do that. Last little example here um, shows you that there's also kind of a different way to do this. And this is actually what's happening on the back end. So when you issue these commands and you say whatever dot destroy, this is the actual code that's doing the work for you. And I want you to see how simple really it is. And it says you're passing in an ID here. Let me make this a little larger so we can see it. So you're passing in an ID, and it says if the ID is like an array, then go ahead basically and destroy it. And you find that one in the array and destroy it. Else, try to find that ID and then destroy it. You see the difference between the two? So one looks to see is it loaded up into memory with what you're working with right now. So if you do it as a variable, so you load the stuff into memory as a variable and then destroy it, it would use the first part. Otherwise, it just finds the ID of the article and brute force does it. So the brute force stuff was all the second approach. The first example that we did fell into the first approach, and it requires that you load it into memory first. All right. One little difference now, there's a little bit of a overlap here, and I probably should just leave this up on the screen so you can read it, and I'm sure you guys did, is we did destroy, and destroy destroys the entry on the database table directly. But then what's delete? Okay, so it says here, it says the second style of row deletion is delete. Every active record class has class methods called delete and delete all. And here's the difference. They don't instantiate or perform callbacks on the object they're deleting. They remove the row immediately from the database. Now that was the impression I had for the first one, right? So what it's telling you is the destroy method first, even if you're doing it brute force, is still loading the object into memory first, even if you're not telling it to save it as a variable. So it's instantiating into memory and then goes back to the table. This directly manipulates the table itself. Then they give you the commands for it. And once again, I'm not going to delete the stuff out of my database, but you can try these commands if you wish. Because you know what's going to happen is we'll end up with nothing in there. Um, and then you also have the capability here, folks, where you can go in and
delete anything with a specific date.
right. So you can kind of add a query to it. That's what the parentheses do is they're putting in that little piece, and you can look for anything that's got a published at date. Notice the direction of that sign. So anything that would be before 2011, basically, would be deleted. And of course, that probably should return nothing because hopefully you weren't doing this years ago. All right. Any questions so far? All right, we're in the home stretch of the chapter here. Just one little part to talk about. One thing that's going to happen um, as we proceed, and we've already played with this little bit of code. So if you were to go into this particular file in your folder structure, app models article RB file, we did some really simple validation where we were checking, as the name implies, to see if something is even in the field. So validates the presence of, we have to have a title and we have to have a body. And otherwise, they won't validate. Now, what happens with a lot of the things that we will deal with here is we will, in our code, start to do the same thing that we've been doing at the prompt, which is to pull something out of our data model or our database, load it into memory temporarily for manipulation, and then hopefully write it back, right? The reason that they're showing this is to check to see if there's errors, okay? But one of the real key things that you're going to see here is this whole use of the @ symbol um, and then doing a combination of like, this type of terminology and trying to see the difference between this approach and then the approach that's right next to it, basically that one, and what the difference is between the two. I'm hoping that already you guys are starting to see that when we have that @ sign in front, that means that we're instantiating the object on the fly. But the difference is that's going to be in a written file in our code. And it makes that implication. When we're doing this approach at the prompt or in the code, we are working directly with the object. And that's not always considered a safe way to work, but there are times when you do want to do that. All right, folks, that pretty much wraps up the chapter here. I'm not really worried about the errors part. I know you can type these in and make them work without too much problem. And that wraps chapter 5. It's a good point in class here for us to take a break, and we'll come back and start on 6.